Hi, good morning. Now, I have a bad habit. I rub my eyes. I've done it since I was a child, and it's really not good. It all started because of hay fever and seasonal allergies that I usually suffer from, even today. Now, it makes my eyes itch terribly, and I simply have to rub them. Over the years, it developed from something that I do to manage my allergies into something comfortable to do when I'm tired or when I haven't had enough sleep. Recently, I started having some problems with my sight, and I spoke to a specialist who reckoned my years of violent rubbing may have contributed to my problems. Naturally, this got me thinking about bad habits. Many of us have one or two, and we're not proud of them. The problem is that we've been doing them for so long that we've lost the ability to control them. They are now a part of us, and it'll take a miracle to stop doing them. Now, it also made me think of a story about an old man who caught his grandson smoking. He took the boy out into the garden and pointed to a little weed growing in the grass. "Pull that out," he said. The boy grabbed a little plant between his thumb and forefinger and pulled it easily out of the ground. The old man then pointed at a bush growing on the edge of the lawn. "Pull that out," he said to his teenage grandson. The boy grabbed the shrub with both hands and tugged hard several times until it came out of the hard ground, trailing sods of earth in its roots. Then the old man pointed to the old mango tree at the bottom of the garden. "Pull that out," he said quietly. The teenager shook his head and said, "Grandpa, there's no way I could ever pull that out." His grandfather put an arm around him and said, "My boy, this is how habits are. When you tackle them early, it's like pulling out a weed. But the longer you leave them, the harder they become to uproot until, like that mango tree, they grow strong roots and become impossible to pull out on your own." Now, I wonder how many of you have friends who are described as, "ono de sa notie." How many of you know people who have done the same thing the wrong way for so long that they really can't do it the right way even if they tried? Maybe you don't know anyone because that person is you. Either way, I want you to think about the effect your bad habits have had on yourself and others for all these years that you've been doing them. It may not be too late to change them, but I want you to understand the cost of every single day that you don't work on uprooting them from your life. Today's message is not just for us, but for those of us with children. Whether we have any now or plan to have some in the future, bad habits are so much easier to stop the earlier they are tackled. The problem with kids is that they can make bad habits look cute. Do not be fooled. Set them straight while you can before their little weeds grow into a mango tree. My name is Kojo Youngson, and I am the sum total of all my habits. So I must add more good and subtract more bad. Good morning, Ghana.
Hello, good morning and welcome to the AM News with me, Mapisa Sibili. Now, in our first story, the Food and Drugs Authority has reiterated its warning to the public not to consume or sell the fishes that washed ashore over the weekend. The FDA issued the fresh warning after it became clear the fish had already made its way into several markets and homes. Now, there are concerns the fishes may be unwholesome, but some residents in the vicinity of the Osu Castle beach who openly admitted consuming the fish say nothing has happened to them.
Okaile operates a drinking spot right at the seashore and explained how the fishes were carried into homes.
Baby, I'm to cramp, baby, I'm cramp, I'm to say, baby, I'm cramp, to say around 12 going, 12 to 1 going, even me home, baby, cry
In my neighborhood, people took some into polythene bags and sent them away, including a woman who lives nearby. She says her grandchildren brought it from the sea. There are those who think it's just normal. Oh yes, that morning I was told the bigger fishes have been sold, and because of their size, they sold out quickly.
Others who live in shacks and around the beach, who spoke to me off camera, said they had consumed the fishes. To others, it was a miracle.
I was
sitting here when I saw them carrying the fish. I was surprised because I had not seen some happen before.
Since you were born, have you seen such miracle at the seashore before?
How old are you?
Right, so here at the Osu Klote Beach, residents and bystanders have been telling us how they consumed the fishes which were washed ashore over the weekend. They've been telling us that because no official information came in, they did not know that these fishes may have had some challenges, for which reason they should not have consumed them. This woman says she still has some of the fish.
Friday, so where be it? You will be at a shore. She made a bar. Wabila ko be here lo agboko ko nka kambani elefen fenike mi wan ka ba lo agboko ngba mo le ka mo le nsho mi no mi on
Friday, we were here whilst our children were at the seashore. They came back with a big fish, which was wagging its tail. So I said the fish is not dead. The children said they got it from the sea. It was first seen by the security men around. They took some, cooked it, and ate it over here. So when the child brought it, we realized it was a good fish. So we removed its scales and chopped it. The fish was healthy. That Sunday, we used it for palm nut soup. So frankly speaking, my family and I ate some of the fish and nothing has happened to us. We had some small ones and we fried it, and these are the bigger ones.
The Fisheries Ministry has advised those who have consumed these fishes to come forward, even as authorities try to unravel the circumstances leading to the death of these fishes.
Well, the Fisheries Commission says preliminary investigations show several of the dolphins that washed ashore in Exim in the western region last weekend were traumatized. Unfortunately, many of them were butchered onshore by locals upon seeing them. Acting Director of the Commission, Dr. Michael Arthur Dadzi, says further tests are being conducted on water samples and the meat to gather more information. He spoke on The Pulse.
What the head of the fish health unit, the fish health veterinarian indicator was that they said they had actually observed that the fish, the dolphins were traumatized. So they are going further, they were stressed, they were traumatized. So they are going further to carry out the various investigations that they had lined up to investigate, including taking the offals and also taking the gills and taking the flesh to carry out examination. It's not only the Fisheries Commission that is conducting that. Food and Drugs Authority is also doing that. The University of Cape Coast, University of Ghana are also conducting investigations by taking samples of the fish and samples of the seawater and the seaweed. So for now, we are very, very hopeful that the fish veterinarians will be able to get us some preliminary report.
Away from that, businesses in the Ashanti regional capital, Kumasi, reeling from the erratic supply of electricity to the city, are demanding a load-shedding timetable to help them plan. The electricity situation in the city has been quite unstable for a while. Now, though officials have promised all is being done to ensure constant and reliable supply by December, the businesses, particularly the printing houses, however, say the unplanned nature of the outages does not help their operations. Prince Apia has more.
This is how the Asafo Printing Press Enclave used to be before the recent unstable power situation. This is how most of the printing presses have turned out to be. Unannounced power cuts are wrecking the operations. Kwesi Ajekum-Hene is chief executive of Alpha and Omega Publications.
You know, our machines use this card. And recently, I lost 5 of the cards as a result of power outages. And each card costs 5,000 euro. And because we don't have consumer protection, who do you report to? So it's a big problem for us all.
Asafo, a buzzing printing hub in Kumasi, is not the same anymore. Nanama is a cold store operator here at Asafo in Kumasi. Her business is reeling under the impact of the current unannounced power outages.
A customer bought meat worth 2,000 cedis. The light was off throughout the night. Now the meat is spoiled.
A cold room is one that does not use generators to power. Today, freezing her stock is a big challenge. So this is one of the freezing compartments of the cold store here in Asafo. And as a result of the unstable power supply, the unannounced erratic power, this machine has damaged. And it would have to take the owner here more than 50,000 Ghana cedis to get a new one or fix it to get back into business. In recent days, she would have to seek the services of bigger cold room operators to stay in business.
3 cedis for long, no. Ebi so 7 cedis. And the last one, I could 2 cedis.
The cold store operators charge us any time we send our meat to be kept in their compartments.
The cold store operators and the fish market here are among the hardest hits. The situation has affected prices of frozen products on the market.
The fish becomes soft and it's difficult removing the scale.
Fish is a box about 3 point something. A be a 4.2, a be a 5 million kra. And it's a box about
the power outages have affected the prices of fishes now.
Say I'm tired, na me here lighted there, a freezer no. Na say intimate freezy, na say ya, dear better no, we imagine.
Meanwhile, both ECG and Gridco have been emphatic the power situation will persist until December this year. But business operators like Mr. Ajekum-Hene and Nanama want the government to either provide a timetable or shed load only at nights for them to stay productive during the day.
The government should tell us if it's doomsday we are experiencing.
There should be a timetable set for us so that we all go by it. We will all disagree the situation whereby they are saying that they have nothing doing about that. That is unheard of.
If nothing changes with the current power cuts, electricity-dependent businesses could grind to a halt before the end of the year. Prince Apia reporting.
And I am Mapita Sibidi for the AM News.
Thanks to Mapito Sibidi for the AM News. Right now, we want to tell you the other stories making the headlines from the newspapers. And then, of course, we will remind you of what's also trending on our portal, myjoyonline.com. So if you're just joining us, this, of course, is the AM show, and we welcome you to the review segment of our show. Ben and I will take you through the papers. I'll do the Ghanaian Times newspaper, the Daily Guide, the two financial newspapers today, the Business and Financial Times and the Business Finder.
So from my end, I'll do the Daily Graphic, the Daily Dispatch, the Daily Statesman, and the Meridian newspaper. So I'll start with the Daily Graphic, and it says, traders flow onto pavements. Graphic Road, CMB enclave, worst affected. So that's the situation there. And if we can grab the front page, you would actually see what is transpiring there. Hawkers, traders, and the place doesn't look good. You know, this interests me because it feeds into what the Greater Accra Regional Minister, Henry Quartey, has been saying in recent times, and we wait to see how he will tackle this specific situation. The last time I posed this question to him, his answer bordered on discipline of everybody and all of us, contributing our quota to solve the problem. I'll get into the details of that story later. But on the international front, African leaders pledged to tackle climate change. And in a historic and united show of solidarity for a continent that contributes only 5% to global emissions, more than 30 heads of state and global leaders committed to prioritize actions that will help African countries adapt to the impact of climate change and build forward better. The program's objective is to mobilize $25 billion to accelerate climate change adaptation action across Africa. And this is wholly important because you would note that a lot of the industrialized world has industrialized on the back of some things that have contributed to climate change, affected our weather patterns, and looking at where we find ourselves in the world, partly in the tropics, and how this has impacted us because of the sunshine and all that. We are worse affected. But how do we deal with the situation? And maybe even if you look at what is happening on our beaches and all of that, who knows? There could be ties to climate change. So this is something really to take a good look at. Gbagbo free to return following acquittal. That is former Ivorian President Laurent Gbagbo and his former youth minister, Charles Blé Goudé, who have been finally acquitted of crimes against humanity. The current president, Alassane Ouattara, has thrown an invitation to them. It remains to be seen whether Laurent will actually, follow through and return to the Ivory Coast, because there are other things pending in the Ivory Coast, and should he return, maybe it could be tricky for him. But in some other stories in the Daily Graphic this morning, Brazil records 4,000 COVID-19 deaths in 24 hours. It is turning out to be a very, very sad situation there. Page, let me just get to it. So pages 16 and 17. Halt supplies to debt-ridden OMCs. I'll be telling you a bit more about that. And unemployment, biggest challenge in Takrady. How do we address the unemployment situation, especially among the youth? In the center spread of the paper, unlicensed engineering practitioners to be sanctioned. How is that even possible that they've been practicing? The story briefly says, practitioners and firms who provide engineering services without the requisite licenses will be sanctioned effective November 1, 2021. In accordance with the Engineering Council Act 2011, Act 819, all engineering professionals and firms offering engineering-related services are to register and obtain licenses from the Engineering Council of Ghana before they can operate legally in this country. But it appears some have not been following the rules. President cuts sought for construction of Award House. Details there. On the back page of the paper, new GSA testing laboratory nears completion. I'm talking about the Ghana Standards Authority, and dead marine mammals still in communities. That's a story I'll be digging into. And those are the headlines in the Daily Graphic.
Let's jump into the Ghanaian Times newspaper. Next on the front page, the Kaswa killing, slain 10-year-old boy to be buried today. Well, that's the expectation of the family. They wanted the body so they could bury him as quickly as possible, as required by the Islamic religion. It wasn't released to them on today's Thursday, so they couldn't get the body on Wednesday. They're hoping that the police would give them access to the body today, Thursday, so that they can do the burial. Also on the front page, President Kat sought for construction of 5 million Ghana cedis building for head of state award scheme. President is very passionate about this project. He says that his office will be responsible for the operational costs of this office, and it will be the second in Africa after Kenya to have a space like this. Very few in the world. ID card for Momo cash withdrawals takes off, but some users are unhappy. If you're a Momo user like myself, you know that the new directive where you have to produce your ID card before you can withdraw cash has taken place. And according to the reports in the paper, some of the vendors are complaining that business is slowing down because of that. Another person also says that he wanted to pay his workers via Momo, but none of them would take it because they all said that they needed ID card before. I just think that sometimes we make such a big deal out of this very important regulations. It's been characterized by a lot of fraudulent activities, and if we want to get rid of that, then we need to comply with this. When people travel, whatever it is that you do, you need to produce an ID card. So here's what you can do. Just a little tip. Take a shot of your ID, your valid national ID card. It could be your driver's license or your passport or your voter's ID. Let it be on your phone. You can save it in your mail, your email, so that when you go, anytime they want it, you can just give it to them. But this is definitely a good thing that we need to back the regulators. We need this. We need this.
So there are two sides to this, and I recall the other day, I think it was Mapito CBD, and I think maybe the Geek Squad may have looked at the other side of this, because people have said by putting out such information, you're also giving out a lot of information about yourself. Mind you, the Ghana card, for example, contains a lot of details. It's going to be your e-passport, it's going to have your TIN and other things. So there's the other side, and in terms of tech, those who go fishing, you know, for people's information. In fact, that's how this entire Momo thing came, because some people sometimes just try numbers. Others actually go to certain places to get a list of numbers of a pool of people, and then they try to scam you. So the bit about this is, in trying to solve one problem, we have to ensure that we are not creating other problems for people when it comes to privacy, when it comes to even scamming. You get it. So those are my only concerns.
I get it, but I'm not sure I appreciate that. I'm not sure how that connects. So because when I went
using
to
these cards,
cash, they didn't take a picture of it. They just took the card number.
Well, here's the thing. People don't need a picture of your details when they have access to your details in whatever processes. That's the same thing that happened.
So is it the vendor that we're doubting? I mean, I don't get it. Like,
everybody
so
in
the fear is that the vendor would leak the information that I'm giving him.
There have been instances, Mama, where some Momo vendors have been supposedly complicit in Momo fraud.
Sure.
When you go to a vendor, and it may not even be that it's the person you're dealing with. Do you notice that sometimes you go to a place and you see people around you maybe stretching their necks, they are trying to see what your PIN is and all of that. So it's dangerous from the standpoint of all of these people and what they could do with your information.
I just
get it.
So
I think basically it's just a matter of the systems to be put in place so that these things don't end up becoming, I'm not saying it's a very positive thing. I've always said that.
We need to trust ourselves a lot more and look at how other countries, because elsewhere, even if you're going to change money, you want to do Forex. You need to show your ID, otherwise you can't do anything. If you want to check into a hotel, they need to see your ID. So how do they do it so that they are so comfortable with it?
Let me tell you something.
You know?
It's as simple as using a Visa card. Why did these debit and credit cards, why did they become problematic? They have systems in place, yet till today, people are still defrauding some people using
as for that one, dear, you can't. That one, dear, will definitely record such incident. We just need authorities to be, ahead at least somehow. But as for this
the whole
initiative,
point. Our authorities
this initiative there, it's a good one. This initiative is good.
No one is doubting how good it is. It's about other things surrounding it. And we might focus on this, especially in our part of the world. In other parts of the world where it's highly techy and there are many more systems in place to counter some of these. But here, you might want to. So I'm simply saying it's a good thing. Abide by. You can't even get your Momo without it anyway.
Yeah.
It is,
we'll get used to it.
But I just wanted to add this about taking the shots. Don't forget, take both sides, and you could even scan. Scanning would be better. So
as in the ID card.
It's better.
Yeah. All right, the big one though is let's rethink our educational system. Education Minister ignites debate. NLA refutes 20 million KGL debt claim with regards to the education. I wonder if a lot of people will pay attention to what the minister is saying now, considering the big mess up. The miscommunication or the fact that they did not communicate to parents who sent their children to faraway places to go to school, only to hear that the date had been postponed. So let's rethink our educational system.
Talking rethink, he's talking of something else. He's not. I
get it, but I'm saying that who is going to focus on what he's saying now when there's a big mess up already? Do you get it? Somebody say, oh, ministry, oh, Ghana education. You need rethinking, first of all, with the very basic things.
Needs to be rethought.
Such as communication, before you tell us about system rethink. You get what I mean? Yeah. It must follow in that order. So I'm not sure, but if you're interested in the story, certainly you can grab the paper and see what the minister is talking about. But on behalf of parents who sent their children. Listen, there was an accident, and really, it's difficult to disconnect. So this young lady was sent to school. She was sent to school.
Oh, the one who had an accident.
She was sent to school, had an accident, and died. But here's the thing. The school was not even in session. I'm not, listen,
here's the other thing. She didn't even know that.
Anything is possible. And I'm not saying that, the accident may not have occurred, but it's so painful when you connect the dots to think that she was actually going to something that was non-existent and she died on the way.
But why not,
so painful.
Mama, why not connect the dots? Because it's 50-50. You could say that maybe that's how things were. I mean, I'm trying to be sensitive with this, but the other bit is you can't help but think about the fact that she was en route to school. School was not even in session.
No.
And in fact, she was not even supposed to have made that journey.
If only
but she
they
did
had communicated.
Because someone didn't let her know that she wasn't supposed to make that.
Listen, they are very fantastic people at the Ghana Education Service. The Director General is an amazing person. Cassandra, the spokesperson, is my friend, and they've been apologizing. But I think this is a big gaffe. It should not happen, really, even as they go apologizing. It should not happen. It's really unnecessary. These days, so many means of communicating to parents and, getting the information to them. But on page 3, I've already told you about the sad incident of the 10-year-old in Kaso. Of course, it's been one of our biggest stories in Ghana. Hopefully, he can be buried according to Islamic custom today. That's what the family is hoping for. Ekwapim Polo in court over nude photos. I think the last time I gave an update, it was the judge reminding them that this is serious business. He is there to do serious business, and wanted the to commence trial after they had, dealt with the other matters. Thankfully, the Accra Circuit Court has fixed April 14 for that trial to begin. But here's the thing, a little bit of drama.
You appear gleeful when you go, thankfully.
I think some lessons ought to be learned here.
Yeah, I know.
So Ekwapim Polo was in court and had to explain to the judge, because the lawyer wanted a bit of time. And he said, he had signed a certain contract. He needed to go to Nigeria to go and do some business. Judge wanted to see the contract. Guess what? She showed the contract on the phone, unsigned, and said, I left the signed one at home. But I'm not saying anything. I'm just giving an update of what happened in court.
But just she left the signed one at home. Which one was she going to work with where she was going for the contract to be enforced. The unsigned one?
Please, I don't know. but whatever happened, I guess the judge was convinced.
Unless maybe somehow well, there's technology, so maybe you can get the person to sign, scan, send to you.
So it's the unsigned one that's on the phone. Okay, so just a little background. So this young lady, her son was celebrating her 7th birthday, and she put out a post, nude photos. She had actually told the investigator that yes, she posted it, but said in court that she did it unintentionally. It was a nude photo of her and her son, and this is what she wrote. I am naked in front of you because this is how naked I was giving birth to you. So in case you find me lying somewhere, don't pass by, but see me as your mom who brought you to life. And that's why she's in court. She posted that on Instagram for everybody else to see and read. I think initially she had pleaded not guilty, but details of what happened in court suggest that she is changing that plea of not guilty to guilty.
No, you will change the stance eventually. Because when the court starts dealing with you, you will realize that if you don't quickly switch, you might end up in very dangerous waters. You remember some of those who have been hauled before Parliament and court and the rest? Look, you don't need to be told. You will advise yourself. Because you see, when you get to a certain point and they want to deal with you, you know, it makes me want to go and read what the law says again about indecent exposure and all of that. Not that necessarily, but it makes for interesting.
So we'll be following up on 14th of April. It's just around the corner. So that's it for the Ghanaian Times newspaper.
Let's look at the Daily Dispatch, and it's a lot of politics. I know you've been following this one. Alan could be running mate to a non-Akan flag bearer, Mensa Bunsu. I saw a couple of because some people have been reacting. I'll tell you about that on the back page. But NLA reacts to allegations by Ghana Lotto Operators Association. And then Baumia launches NPA's National Retail Outlet Fuel System. There's also this one. Bear with Gridco over recent power outages. Ghanaians urged. Mama, bear with Gridco. Bear with them. Be patient. Tobo.
Did you see that?
Name? Your name is Jigbodi. Is Jigbodi not your name?
It is. Did you see? But you see, the reality, did you see the Kumasi story, the coastal owner who was saying that, did I go or did I come?
Yesterday.
Did I go or did I come?
Business is terrible then.
The only thing, the most painful is the fact that you're experiencing something and you will not give a schedule to the people. You see, that's the whole thing.
You basically have no control over it. Like, you can't, it just happens.
That is what is most upsetting about these issues, because you will definitely have a challenge. Yeah. But how you communicate that challenge and how you plan with the people is what would give us confidence. But if the person has no idea when the light is going to go off or when it's going to come back, and the person's business is heavily reliant on electricity,
you know what this is like? It's like having a problem, but you can never tell when the problem will arise. It just arises. So you can't plan around how to deal with the problem. That's how they feel.
So when you say bear with us, how do we bear with you when we don't know our left or our right? How do you bear with somebody like that?
But we're going to have to bear anyway.
No, see, you're saying that you will fix it. We get it that you will fix it. But in the meantime, what am I working with? Also say, I'll be off like the whole day on Monday. Then I can push my clients and get them, get to sell my products. I can plan.
But to be fair, and maybe to go down memory lane a bit, under the former administration when we experienced it, and mind you, Rawlings had his, we may not necessarily.
But we said this one is different from all the others we've experienced. So why are you giving me that example?
Doomsaw is Doomsaw. But Doomsaw is Doomsaw. Don't call a cow a cow. But this bit about not having a timetable, it appears to not be new. But it goes on for a while, then you have some schedule. I think the scheduling usually comes in when there's admittance that, I don't know.
So that's when you hear rethink educational system, like rethink.
Rethink the energy system.
The basic things, you know, when the foundation is not.
I beg you, this table you are shaking.
I'm just saying.
I don't know of any fundamentals. Ghana's oldest medical doctor dies at 101. I just felt
that should be a celebration.
Yes, Dr. Emmanuel Evans Anfum. He's Ghana's oldest medical practitioner, over 100 years. And one of his sons, Nitaiko Evans Anfum, took to his Facebook wall to post about the demise of his father.
What is painful, though, is the fact that we get to hear after they passed, and we're still, you know, doing this.
This would have been someone to really interact with.
Yeah, I celebrated him.
I think it's pathetic.
Well.
There are so many people with a wealth of knowledge and all of that, and all of them are passing without having written any books, any biographies or autobiographies, and some of them we don't even get to know about. I mean, the last time I spoke to Professor Adai Mensah, for example, look at some of the things he shared, and that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
We let them go. I'll just wrap up with this, Mama V. The back page, leave that to the, quote, bloody fools, end of quote. Boakye Jako slams Che Mensah Bonsu over non-Akan's statement. And the former Minister of Energy has berated Majority Leader Che Mensah Bonsu over his claims that the MPP's presidential slot should be reserved for a non-Akan. And the basis of saying that is he thinks it would confirm the rhetoric about the fact that the MPP is an Akan-centered party. And Che Mensah Bonsu has also been saying Alan Chamatin could be running mate to a non-Akan flag bearer. Whether he's pointing to Mr. Vice President Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia or whatever is happening, we don't know. But interestingly, yesterday we also heard Obri Ibrahim speak about wanting to contest as General Secretary. And, you know, I liked his pep, the vim, when he was asked whether he was ready to go toe-to-toe with his boss. And he said, yeah, what thing we no see before? No, he didn't literally say it like that, but I was like, what thing we no see before? I go do you know, as we enter next year, you will see things on the political landscape. Let's check out some other papers.
The Daily Guide newspaper, and here's what's on the front page of the paper. Mahama wants Ibrahim Bauxite back. President cut sold for 5 million Ghana cedis Ghana award scheme. Fetish priestess grabbed in Kaswa boys killers case. So this woman is supposedly the one who influenced at least one of the boys. One of the boys at the center of this by watching her adverts of, you know, promising to make you an instant billionaire or millionaire. Thankfully, the police, because they're looking for who caused them to do what they did, allegedly. And so...
But that's going to be a tricky business.
Hopefully...
Very tricky business.
So hopefully they will be able to connect and build a very good case. We become very sensational and emotional about the matters, but this is a murder charge, and you need a lot to prove that these two people who have been grabbed actually did it, or whoever is connected to it is part of it. So just don't keep your hopes too up high when you hear arrests, but let's just hope that the people who are supposed to build a very good case will be able to build a case, and we can get justice for that 10-year-old. Bawumia outdoors fuel monitoring system. NLA calls operators bluff is also another story in the paper today. I guess this is where I will leave it. Let's see. Let me just quickly go to the center spread. Okay. All right. That's it for the paper.
Do you have any presidential ambitions?
Oh, I would love to be president.
You'd love to be. You'd love to be number one. Gotcha. You'd love to be number one.
But who doesn't want to be president?
Oh, there are people who... there are so many bright people who have said that, no, I simply don't... That kind of box and,
I tell you what,
and the bureaucracy, and you want to do this,
I tell you what,
the systems won't allow you to do it.
No, they want to be president, except that they don't want to go through the hassle of being with a political
party.
So
you're ready for the hassle?
No, I'm not. I want to be president, you know?
So you heard it here for the first time. Mama V Jigbodi Owusu Abuaje stating categorically, you know, the president should watch out, because you just might have, and I just chipped that in because on page 9, something that skipped me of the Daily Graphic, Kosovo's 38-year-old president takes office, youngest in the history of the country. And you can see her, you know, strutting her stuff.
See, that's my inspiration right there.
Okay. So you heard it here. So if in future any party goes to her and she starts checking out,
you didn't hear what I said?
I'll drag you myself.
I said I want to be president, but I don't want to go through the hustle.
No,
because I just want to be president.
So I think we'll just do online, but right before that, the dead marine mammals still in communities. Apparently, they are still there. Experts and public health authorities are actually checking out the situation. It ties into what we shared earlier today. And the lady, you know, stating that, oh, this is not even the first time. We've been doing this whenever there's such a landfall, or if you like, we actually get them. A community of fish processors at Axim claimed they bought the mammals from fishermen who sold it to them between 1,500 and 4,000 Ghana cedis.
A hustle.
Yes.
But given the opportunity, would you want to remain Ghanaian or change your nationality? You know, before coronavirus, and this is a question that I would love to ask people. Before coronavirus, a lot of people would have loved to be in other countries, in Europe. I wanted to be in Singapore.
Singapore?
Yeah.
So you wanted to have dual nationality?
I wanted the country to adopt me.
Okay. So I'll tell you
But I don't know if that's the same dream
I'll
today.
tell you this. I think I'm very much my father's son. He had opportunities to be a national of other countries.
Yeah.
Canada, Denmark, and the rest.
He chose to be Ghanaian.
He chose not to be. And for me, I think it's a matter of pride. Not pride in the vain sense, but like Kofi Annan, like Annabedi Pele. Like, I want, whatever I attain, I want the red, gold, green, black star to be attached to it. I don't want it to be watered down with. No, it's not so much about patriotism.
I shared this.
I just have that thing about, I want Ghana to be on that landscape. You see how sometimes you have someone with dual nationality. We have to run out of here, but the person, if the person does something well, they would say, oh, British, But if there's something, let's take Anthony Joshua. You
I was just going to say,
oh, Nigerian-born British
or British boxer.
Ghanaian, that's it.
Just before we go, I said many years ago, okay, so I used to work with Sky Power FM in Takoradi, and this is April Fool's Day prank. People didn't know. We announced that America was looking for people to fight in Iraq, and oh.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, cool. Yeah, cool.
You will become American if you volunteered and, you know, if you were chosen, if you were picked to. And I can't tell you the number of people that showed up. And when we told them April Fool, they could have bent
I'll be here in Ghana. You can be sure of that. There's not enough time to go online. Sports is up next. Interesting stuff. I know they'll be talking about PSG mauling Bayern Munich and Chelsea for none. So
I guess.
But they had the cheapest draw.
So
Porto, it was the cheapest draw. If they hadn't won, go.
Whether it's cheap or not, I mean, it was a win.
But we'll pray. We'll do against in the second leg. Sports is up next on the AM show. Do stay.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to come your way with the AM Sports on AM Show. I am Muftau Nabila Abdullahi. If you are an Olympics fan, you can begin to dream. The club has won the Ghana Premier League title just 2 times, and that happened decades ago. People are beginning to believe that this is the year Great Olympics might just win the Ghana Premier League title. However, the person in charge of the technical direction of the club says that the club has got what it takes to win it, but the target is just to finish in the top 4. Continued their stay at the summit of the league table with a 1-0 win over Medyama SC In the opening game of the second round of the Ghana Premier League, football pundits are predicting that Great Olympics might just win the Premier League for the first time since the 1970s. However, head coach of the team, Anowoka, is cautiously optimistic of his team's chances of becoming champions at the end of the season.
God willingly. That's why I said on the quiet, I don't want to rush and say I will win the league. I want to be in the first four. But if God should do me a favor, or he should see my handiwork and gives me the trophy, I will say hallelujah and thank God.
Olympics had a very good run in the first round of the Premier League season after 17 games. Their good start in the second round, according to Anowoka, is just the beginning of greater things they want to do this year.
Yes, of course, yes. We went to Takwa and we have to draw with them, which nobody expected will even come back with a point. But God willingly, God made it for us, and we had a drawn game there. But when the second round started, we made them the same thing, and we beat them. So like people are imagining or thinking about is the same. Olympics, we are taking match after match, and we finish with them. We are taking off Lagos City, and that's the preparation we are having towards them.
Occupies the summit of the Premier League table with 33 points. Their next game is against Legon Cities, an opposition they defeated 3-0 in the first round of the competition. And still on the Ghana Premier League, 17 years ago, Mariano Barreto was at the Lenclair Stadium in Obuasi, where he led the Black Stars to defeat Zambia by 2-0. He returned to the venue yesterday, and it was all smiles for Porcupines as his Asante Kotoko side defeated Bechem United by 4-0, courtesy of goals from Abdul Ganiu, Fabio Gama, Andy Kumi, and Vinicius Michael.
Warrior, decent cross from Imoro, dealt with solidly by Andy, but straight into the goalkeeper's hands. But this time around, it was a sweet right-footed shot from Abdul Ganiyu, zoomed straight into the net for the first goal for the Porcupine Warriors. Set on or laid up pass by Fabio Gama to Ganiyu, shot straight into the net. Too powerful for the goalkeeper Daniel Afaju to keep. So Hafiz Konkoni and his Chargers had to fight, and fight they did. That opportunity came to Charles, nothing happened to it. Augustine Okra also had an opportunity. The defense is picked up by Augustine Okra, lays on the pass for Fabio Gama. 2 matches, 2 goals. Fabio Gama is hot like fire.
Blasting home from close range.
And you take a look at the goalkeeper once again, you realize that he was moving to his right side, but he shot the ball to his left side. Moro this time with a cross. Oh, sweet goal. Sweet goal. And the man has finally registered his name on the score sheet after missing a few chances in the first half.
Instincts to put the ball at the back of the net. And that was a wonderful cross and a brilliant header from Andy Kumi.
Got taken over. This is Ripon. Ripon lays a pass. Good skill by Mudasiru. And he recovers the ball again, and he's been fighting for every loose ball since the match started. Medyama with a shot. Side netting, goal kick advantage. But unfortunately, Sami took his eye off the ball for a second, got it back. Fabio, lovely pass from Augustine Okra. Augustine Okra gets it back again, but he doesn't. Shot is fired on target against the goalpost, and Vinicius gets a goal. In the right place at the right time. Lucky goal for Brazilian import Vinicius.
And that was the first time Kotoko has scored 4 goals in a single match since 2015. The last time they did it was against Medyama Stars in the Ghana Premier League. 6 years on, they've been able to score another 4 goals. And the man who led them, as I mentioned earlier, is Mariano Barreto. Any coach would have been excited. However, he says that he's just got a group of players and not a team.
I'm happy the way they try to make the things. I think if we take so many chances of clear goal, today should be 8-9-0. okay, it's not 9-0. They have one chance.
Yes.
Okay? So, they tried today to make what we are training hardly. After the match, in the day after, we trained twice, morning, afternoon. Yesterday, we training. Tomorrow, we will continue training. Tomorrow, we have 2 trainings.
Yes.
You understand?
You have a big match this weekend.
Yeah, because we have match and we don't have time. And they have to understand that football is not only, there are rules and there are a discipline, and they are getting it.
Okay.
So we will need little time. It's not because we win 4-0 now we are heroes. No. They make good things today.
Sure.
There are many things we have to improve more.
Okay.
And I know they are trying. Look, our best striker left. The second striker take injury last. And even that, we create around 12 chance of goal today. Score 4 and the other one. From the defense, we have to improve a little bit better.
Okay.
Our midfield, Mudasiro, is not completely fit. Okay? And we have some problems in the team because we have around 6 players out
on injury
before I come.
Okay.
And some of them, they are key players. So the people have to try to help them.
Okay.
But when we win 4-0, of course, I should be happy. But only today. Tomorrow we start our work. What I know, what I saw today, and even when we drew last day, last match, what I saw that we have good players.
Okay.
We are trying to build a good team.
He's got very good players. He's trying to build a good team. He thinks the Craft won by 8-9 goals to 0 in that game. But now, let's do something on the brothers of Asante Kotoko, which is House of Oak. They went for the services of former Medyama head coach in the person of Samuel Boadu. Boadu resigned and joined House of Oak a week later. Medyama has dragged him to the Player Status Committee of the Ghana Football Association, citing that his decision to leave the club has left them psychologically and physically in damages, and they are saying that his irreparable harm must be sorted out by the Player Status Committee of the GFA. They are demanding substantial damages for his decision to arbitrarily terminate his contract. The 2-time FA Cup holders are seeking for substantial damages for what they described as arbitrary decision of the 2 coaches to abrogate their contracts with the club. Boadu, a former coach of Asoka Deportivo, resigned from the Mauve and Yellows in February and signed a permanent contract with House of Oak a week later. Medyama, who have filed a case before the GFA Player Status Committee, is reported to have backed their case with legal justification for financial claims, citing multiple adjudication cases from FIFA and the Court of Arbitration for Sport. The Takwa-based club say the decision by the coaches Samuel Boadu and Hamza Obin are premature, hasty, arbitrary, unacceptable, and above all, abuse of office as an employee, and did not find it expedient and prudent to warn or complain to the club before taking the decisions. The club say the arbitral decisions have caused irreparable damage and has had a negative impact on the overall performance of the team. Medyama also insists the damage done physically and psychologically to the club due to the sudden and planned departure of the 2 coaches cannot be explained and are now seeking for residual value in damages. Boadu's assistant Hamdan Obin also quit his role at the club on March 16 but joined his boss at House of Oak a week later. Boadu spent 3 years at Medyama before he was joined by his assistant Hamza Obin, who spent 2 years at the club. Joy Sports sources say Samuel Boadu's decision to resign from Medyama FC was as a result of anticipation that he was going to be fired by the club. Sources within the management and technical team had indicated to Joy Sports that there was a planned decision to replace Samuel Boadu after Medyama's poor start to the new Premier League season.
Hello there, welcome back on the AM show. And as promised, we have an interaction coming your way shortly. It's with a senior research fellow and head of the language, literature and drama section of the Institute of African Studies at the University of Ghana. It's a conversation on the African identity, how we may have lost our way in respect of our real place in the world. It's about cultural and religious practices on the continent, and it's also about governance and education. The issues of hairdo and all of that will feature prominently. It's a conversation with Dr. Obadele Kambong, who is with the University of Ghana. That is up next on the AM Show. Dr. Obadele Kambong, thank you very much for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you very much for having me.
Right. So I found it interesting while interacting with you. You returned from Nigeria only recently.
Yeah, just on Friday night.
While interacting with you on email, via text message and all of that, you would send me messages in Chi, and all of that. I found that, very interesting. And I know you though the United States is your place of birth, you speak a country, you speak Chi.
Yes.
You speak, that is Asante Kotoko.
Asante Kotoko.
You speak Yoruba.
Yes.
And I just heard you a short while ago speaking Yoruba. You speak Wolof,
yes,
some Swahili,
yes,
and some Kikongo. Yes. How did you manage that, all of that?
One thing, a lot of it comes from identity. Once you understand that you're African, then you understand that all of these languages are our languages. Most of us have an identity that's a very fragmented identity, where we think that these modern day creations, so-called tribes and ethnic groups, that's the identity. So when I'll say, oh, this is my language, then it's only the one that comes from my ethnic group. It's because usually we only become Africans during the World Cup, where if the Ghana team is out, then we'll just go for Nigeria or South Africa or something like this. And it's really a rhetorical type of position where if I'm giving a speech, then I'll speak high and mighty, lofty about Africa and being African. But on a day-to-day basis, you really don't see it. If you see food from Nigeria, you'll be like, oh, that's their food, right? But then only what comes from maybe even your ethnic group, or at best Ghana, oh, that's our food, right? And I think really a lot of it comes down to, once you understand that you're African, coming back to the language, you realize that all of these are our languages. So even beyond those languages, I can greet in another 50 more, like Bamanakan, I can greet in Bamanakan from Mali. I can, greet in Amarinya from Ethiopia. Just small, but any language that I come across, I'm always giving effort. Igbo, when I was there, they were just, clapping for me. Oh, how did you get the Igbo too? But it really just comes from identity. So coming from a place like the United States, our very first identity, once we have any level of consciousness, is that we're all black people, we're all African people. So if I see someone from Haiti, that's my brother. If I see someone from, Brazil, that's my sister. If I see someone from Ghana, that's my uncle, that's my auntie. Whereas here, it tends to start off with 50 hurdles before you even get to being Ghanaian. Because first I'm from this town, then I'm from this family, then from this clan, and then from this region, and then from this area, and then from this, So basically, before you even can get a sense of even Ghanaian identity, you have to get over all of those hurdles before you can even see yourself as West African. So even when I was there, they were saying, oh, the Ghana must go back. There's a history to that we are all pretty much familiar with. But then you get to a thing of, okay, well, before we can even get to a West African identity, how do you get past Ghanaians don't like Nigerians, or Nigerians don't like the Ghanaians, and they have, just Jollof wars and these types of things. And then even beyond that, how do you even get to an African identity? And then before that, how can you even get to a diaspora identity?
Right. So very important, because language is part of culture, basically. But unfortunately, you would notice that the ordinary Ghanaian, if we were to go outside right now and gather maybe 10 people and ask them how many languages, local languages, they could read properly and write properly, it would be an issue. How much of a problem do you feel that is to the African, to the Ghanaian? Are we, letting go of our own and embracing others, maybe a bit in folly? What is your thinking on that?
So I've actually had those types of situations where you'll ask Ghanaians, even Ghanaians, to read and write their own language, right? It's a problem, right? So you'll have people who are native speakers of Akan, and I actually did a study on that where I basically polled 50 Ghanaians, all of them are Asante Kotoko speakers, and then I just looked at two words, how they write Medase and how they write Mepaucho. I got 34 different ways that they spelled Medase. Just Medase alone. Some were putting apostrophes in there, some were chopping up the me separate from the da, some were writing it all together, some just had one letter I inside. So, even something as simple as that, Mepaucho, something like 37 different ways that they were writing it. because this is not even like other languages. This is the one that you say is your own language. But then, just in terms of understanding the orthography and how things are written and how they should be expressed in writing, and then even trying to read it well, it's a problem. And I think part of it comes from, just as you mentioned, the conceptualization, where we just say is local. Now, when you say local, it just means anything that just happens to be close to where you are. But when we say these are our indigenous languages, it's a different nuance of meaning. It says that this is what's ours, not just what happens to be close by, but this is what's actually ours. But then in terms of the reading and writing, I teach a course here called Medu Nature. Now,
called what?
Medu Nature.
Medu Nature.
And what you say what? Right, that's what most people say when I mention it. This is the first writing system in the history of the entire planet Earth. And it comes from this continent that we now know as Africa. And it was written by people who called themselves Kemetiu, which means black people. And it was in a nation called Kemet, which translates to land of black people.
That I've heard before.
Exactly, right? This is what people, tend to know as hieroglyph writing system. They tend to know it as ancient Egypt. But the people themselves were never sitting around saying, look, I'm here in ancient Egypt. And they never was sitting there saying, look, I'm an ancient Egyptian. They said this is Kemet, which means the exact same thing as Abibimai. And they called themselves Kemetiu, which means the exact same thing as Abibifor. And you find that in languages throughout the continent, we have this conceptualization. So for example, if you look at the Yoruba language, the way that we conceive of this continent is Ile, Adulawo, and it translates to literally land of those who are black in color, and we call ourselves Adulawo. If you look, for example, in Bamanakan, which is the Bambara language, when people say Bambara beings, this is referring to those people. So in that language, the way to say a black person, the way to say an African is Farafin, which translates to the same thing as Obibini, a black person. And then the way to refer to the land is Farafina, which is again land of black people.
Right.
If you look at Igbo,
there was even a movie, a South African movie with that, Farafina.
Yeah,
there was a
right,
South African
exactly,
movie with that,
right.
Of that same title.
Right, so Farafina, that's actually where it's coming from. I'm not sure if you're referring to Sarafina, but there's something very similar in terms of that word. If you look at Igbo, they have Indisioji, which is the land of those who are black, literally the black-haired people, right, referring to those who are black. If you look at Wolof, for example, the way that we call this continent is Real Nitkunyul, which is the land of those who are black, right? So, and we call ourselves Nitkunyul or plural Nitnyunyul. If you look at...
I even hear with the Wolof that what we call jollof rice, because it came from there, it's Wolof rice. That we have, in Ghana and Nigeria, we call jollof rice, but it actually is Wolof rice.
So they used to have an empire, and it was called the Jollof Empire, right? So there were a series of different states, so Baul, all of these different states there, and Jollof was one of them. So it's the same thing as saying like Fanti Kenke, right? Or versus Ga Kenke. To say Jollof rice says those people's rice. So yeah, in Ghana and Nigeria, they're fighting over who has the best other people's rice.
Other people's rice.
Right? It would be like saying, oh, the Banli speakers have the best Fanti Kenke. It would be like, what are we really saying here? So what all of this is going into is that, so basically what we're going into is that when we conceive of it in our own languages, and a lot of it goes down to education, I know we'll come back to this point, that when we could actually read our own writing system that started again over 5,400 years ago, then we would be able to even get a concept of that idea. Most people have the idea that we just started to call ourselves black after white people called themselves white in reaction to slavery. And like, this is a narrative that everyone is, putting out there. But when you actually go to the text, you can go to the pyramid text of Pepi Neferkare. And in it, it says that you stand like the Apis bull in front of the black people, right? So this is our concept. But when we go to, can we even read that language? Can we even write that language? So I teach it here. But out of those who have been at University of Ghana for decades, how many of them know how to read and write the first language that was ever written here? It would greatly expand our understanding. And I know we're coming to this topic too, but you'll find out that the author of the oldest book in the world also had locks just like mine, right? Wow, that's Imahu Ptahhotep. And I'm sure maybe you can even put some of the images in. If you just type in the name Ptahhotep, Ptahhotep, then you'll see images of him depicted with locks that look exactly like mine.
And he had locked hair.
He had locked hair. This is exactly what I'm talking about, right? What they call dreadlocks, nowadays. But this is the author of the first book in the history of the entire planet Earth. The oldest book is the Instructions of Ptahhotep. I was just reading the Chi translation of it to my son and my daughter yesterday, right? Now, imagine how different a view we would have if we actually had an education system in the sense of something that told us something about our past. Because we have a very truncated memory, we think that, oh, when the white people brought us reading and writing, but even the Latin system is ultimately based on Medyama, what they call hieroglyphs. Right. So they've never even invented a writing system. And what it really goes into, and this is the point I'm making, that's the first full book, that's the Instructions of Ptah-hotep. But if you look at the first fragmentary book, this is that of Harjadef. He also had locks just like mine, and it looks like the same as mine, and he looks exactly like me. If you look at Kagimni, the exact same thing. You'll see him as a black man, and you'll see he has locks. So all of these people, we owe our education. If we have a university, if we have a school or anything else on the planet Earth, it comes from the Africans who had the locks just like this.
So most people don't even have a good concept of, this is one of my languages here in my country, and there are hundreds of them even here in Ghana, not to talk of Africa. But even taking it to the national level, we don't officially have languages that we subscribe to and say, yes, we may have those that we say officially, well, these are the foremost in the country, but to use it officially, like in parliament, like in state institutions, like going to any ministry and expressing yourself in that. No, you must use English. How does that make you feel?
Well, what I'll say to that is that it's really the end result of a problem, right? So sometimes we'll see these things and we'll say, oh, that's our problem. No, that is the end result of an intentional situation that was designed to bring about that. Now, what I want to speak about, in 1890, 1891, you had what were called the Mohonk conferences.
Mohonk.
Mohonk, M-O-H-O-N-K, Mohonk conferences. And basically, these were a series, 2 conferences that were held on the Negro question. So no black people were invited to there. And what they decided was, how are we going to make sure that black people are miseducated? So this is post, so-called Civil War in the US, and they're trying to decide what can we give them to make sure that they will always be subservient? What type of miseducation will make sure that they will never understand and fully realize? When we even look at the word education, it comes from educare, which is like to pull out what's already inside of you. Basically, what their goal was to suppress what's inside of them and basically make them, imitation white people. So, like, literally, I have students who are African studies, and they'll say, if it's not for white people, we would be swinging from trees, we would have tails and be monkeys. Literally, these are real-life human beings. I may be able to call them up on the phone, and you can speak to them, who actually articulate this. Now, among other things, it's actually not the case. But beyond this, how do you even get to a mindset where you have that? Well, it's because people start off reading Plato, right? Or Aristotle or so forth. Now, if you actually read Plato, right, the laws I'm speaking to specifically, he says that he wishes that the freeborn children among the Greeks could learn as much of these subjects as those innumerable crowds in Egypt, right? That's Kemet, the land of black people. And he says when he thinks of Greek education, it's education of guzzling swine. This isn't me speaking. He's saying pigs, right? He's saying Greek education is education for guzzling swine. But now the brutish who brought us this miseducational system, they will tell us to revere the Greeks. But if you actually read the Greeks themselves, they're saying that their education is education for pigs. To become more human, you have to learn from the black people there in Kemet. And they even go into how much the ferry, how many drachma you have to pay to go on the ferry to Kemet. Because everyone who's anyone, whether it's Pythagoras, whether it's Thales, whether it's Solon, the lawgiver, all of them came to study in the land of black people. And guess what? From people who had locks, just like mine, right?
So I have read a lot about some of what you talk about. The whole idea of, if you want to dominate these people, first of all, make them hate themselves, their skin color, whatever they stand for. But how do you think an entire population, it was possible for this to be done, to the point where in the 21st century, you would meet a lot of people who, if they could, they would change their skin color. And we see some people doing that. We see it through bleaching. We see it through so many other ways. What do you think we can do, basically, to reverse this? Is it even reversible?
So first off, there has to be an education system, and I would submit that there is no education system here in Ghana, and everything that you're talking about is evidence to that fact. If we had an education system, then we would actually be loving ourselves rather than hating ourselves. But there's a quote by the late Nana Amos Wilson, where he says, if you want to understand a problem, don't think about who suffers from the problem, think about who benefits from the problem. And basically it's the old adage of follow the money trail. So if you find out who benefits and who profits from the problem, then usually that's the one who created that problem in the first place. So what happens once you hate your own clothing? Well, now whose clothing do you have to go and purchase? You understand? What happens when you hate the texture of your hair? Well, now who do you have to go to get chemicals and wigs and weave-ons, right? If you go to, you know, who benefits from us not wanting our own language? Well, now whose books do you have to go and purchase? Your Shakespeare's and so forth and so on. So like literally there's an economic imperative. So any aberration that we see in ourselves, we need to start thinking about who profits from this aberration. And most likely that's the one who created the aberration in the first place. What does this do to their conscience? What does this do to their consciousness? What does it do to them being when they think that the only begotten son of the creator of everything looks exactly like the white man? Even the story of Jesus is plagiarized from the story of Heru. It's basically an amalgamation of the story of Usir and Heru, because when you talk about the death and resurrection of the Savior, that's the story of Usir, right? When you talk about Immaculate Conception, it's about how Aset, this is what they call Osiris, Isis, and Horus. It's about how Aset.
So this is the ancient Egyptians.
Right, exactly. So that's this entire storyline that they get, that they now say. And you also have to look at, you know, the ideas at the Council of Nicaea, where they brought these ideas together in order to come up with a canon. All right.
The Nicene Creed.
Exactly. The Nicene Creed, the Nicene Conferences, all of these different things. So basically they're coming up with, all right, are we going to say he's only a spirit, or are we going to say he's a human being? And then they made a decision, right? An executive decision that, let's say it was a human being. But where those stories actually come from, where you go to the 10 Commandments actually come from the 42 declarations of Ma'at and Kemet. But now how many children here in Ghana actually get a chance to read the 42 declarations? So, you know, again, if we even look at something like the 10 Commandments, how those actually are derived again from Kemet, from the 42 declarations of Ma'at. So all of these ideas in terms of Judgment Day, like all of those are directly derived, and you can actually go and read the primary text. But how many of even our professors know this, much less the students? So when we come to this idea of okotoria, nemeria, hwana obejene yonko atata, basically the idea is that if the crab is crawling, and then its children are crawling, who's going to teach the other one how to walk, you know, little by little? And that's, you know, basically the idea. And it translates to, you know, if the catfish, when it's fresh, if you don't bend it at that time, later on when you smoke it,
bend it later.
So it's a play on words, because adrene is actually catfish, but then adrene, we can also think about it like this. So if you're not able to shape that mind, now if you try to tell some professor, oh, all of this came from you, you can actually present them the evidence. They could actually get the translation or even learn to read it. But, you know, at that point in time, it's much too late, because they've built their entire castle on a sand. This is where we get the issue, right? Because there's this lack of continuity and a lack of memory. And because of the lack of memory, there's a quote by Dr. Runoko Rashidi, where he says, what we do for ourselves depends on what we think of ourselves. What we think of ourselves depends on what we know of ourselves. And what we know of ourselves depends on what we have been told. That's to say, what we've been told about ourselves. So if intentionally in these missionary schools and other colonial, you know, institutions, if we're not told very much about ourselves, then we won't know very much about ourselves. And if we don't know very much about ourselves, we won't think very much about ourselves. And if we don't think very much of ourselves, and we won't do very much for ourselves. So all of these other things that we're complaining about, whether it's doomsday, whether it's the bad roads or whatever, how can you expect someone to do something for themselves when they think that they're worthless, when they think that all of their ancestors were monkeys swinging from trees? This is, you know, the source of the problem.
Now let's get to this entire debate about wearing locks. I mean, we'll get into it from our school system and all of that, but do you identify as a Rastafarian? Do you practice Rastafarianism?
So absolutely not. I don't identify as any type of Christian whatsoever, and Rastafarianism is basically a branch of Christianity. The whole Abrahamic story and all of those things that we know are plagiarized from, you know, the Kemetic texts. You know, basically to be...
it has elements of Judaism.
Exactly,
and all of that.
right. It accepts Adam and Eve and all of this other white mythology, which is really anti-reality, and it goes against everything that we actually know from history, right?
So just to chip in, are you saying that everything biblical is
a figment of someone's imagination.
I would say
none of it happened, because I do know that some historical elements have been questioned, but you'd also be told that the Bible is not a historical book. But there are things in the Bible that historically you would actually find. So what are you saying? Are you saying it is myth? It is a figment of someone's imagination? What is it? The Jesus bit you mentioned, for example, do you mean he never existed in the first place? Just clarify.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly it. So first you have plagiarism in the Bible. So for example, if you look at Proverbs that are supposedly attributed to a mythical character named Solomon, you can go and read from an actual historical human being named Imahu Amenemope, and you'll read the Proverbs word for word, literally in the exact same sequence that supposedly Solomon is saying them. We know where the actual texts are. They plagiarized them from. Right, where we go to Psalm 104, this is literally plagiarized word for word, line by line from the hymn to the Aten by Nesubiti Akhenaten, right, who's often referred to as the first monotheistic ruler in the world. We can go deeper into that. But we actually know the text that they stole from Kemet in order to make what they are now calling this Bible. However, again, it's really just a sad situation that because we don't have an educational system, we never go to primary sources.
So you wear locks, but you don't practice Rastafarianism. It's not your belief.
That's all.
What do you believe then? African spirituality?
What the locks signified at that time is the same thing they signify now, which is a connection to the Creator, a connection to reality, which is why if you go to Umzansi, what they now call South Africa, you'll see the Sangoma, who has the exact same locks. If you go to Yoruba, society, you'll see Dada, and he has the exact same locks. If you come to the Akan, you'll see the Okomfo, who has the exact same locks. So throughout space and time, going back from 5,000 years all the way up to now, what it signifies is someone who has a connection to the Creator. Where in the case of Imahu Ptahhotep, who has, again, the oldest book in the history of the world, he could have gone in for another way, but he decided that he wanted to take a spiritual path, which is why his wisdom still lives on. Even in Kemet, they said, who is like Kagimni? Who is like Hardjadef? Who is still like, Ptahhotep? They revered our ancestors because they understood what it meant. Now there's a history in terms of how Rastafarianism, as they call it, or Rastafari, it's actually a proper name, right? So when people say, oh, I'm a Rastafarian, it's like, what in the world is that even supposed to be?
Here, Raz means Lord, and Tafari was actually...
Exactly. So Ras is actually the head, right? But by extension, it means someone who is like the head of something, someone, exactly. So that's Haile Selassie. Now, long before Haile Selassie was ever born into the world, locks were already here, right? As we see 4,000, 5,000 years ago, you can see those with locks carved in stone.
So maybe they have their belief, but it is something they associate with their belief.
Right. So with the Italo-Ethiopian conflict, you had all of these black people who were literally standing in lines just to try to fight for Ethiopia, because that was considered to be the last territory that had not been under colonization. So they said, okay, and rather than letting the Italians go and brutalize, and they used all types of mustard gas and all types of things to commit genocide against the people. You have black people who are fighting and saying, we're going to try to stand up for Ethiopia. You also had a quote from Nana Marcus Garvey where he was talking about Ethiopia will stretch forth its arm. And, basically this idea that a king will rise. And then right after that, here you get Haile Selassie who's being crowned. So you had these people like, oh, this is the prediction. This is the prophecy. Okay, this is it. So they started to go in for this. But again, a lot of it is based on this Abrahamic, type of religion. It's based on this Christianity.
And that's where you have a problem.
Exactly.
Let me ask you this. So this African spirituality you subscribe to, what exactly is it?
Very good.
In a nutshell, what exactly is it?
In a nutshell.
How do you practice it?
Very good. In a nutshell, what it's all about is having good character and living one's life well, subanpa or brapa, so that you can become an ancestor, so that you can fulfill your destiny. So even when we translate religion into Twi, we use something like osom, which is like to serve, right? It's service, basically. If you look at the same thing, they try to translate religion into Yoruba, they'll say esin, which is again coming from the root word sin, which is like to serve. But that is basically based on a non-African worldview, like the reason why you're here on the planet is to serve an imaginary white man. Whereas in our worldview, the reason why you're on the planet is to fulfill your nkrabia, right? It's to fulfill your exactly your ayamo, what they translate as destiny. So that's your entire reason for being here.
So let's narrow the discussion down to not just locks, but locks in our educational system. the Achimota School in recent times has come to the fore. There's been a lot of talk about them. And I find it interesting because the motto of the school, ut omnes unum sint, actually means that all may be one. That's what the Latin means. And if you look at the philosophy of the founding fathers, including the likes of Kwejir Agri, among others, it tells you the philosophy was, it didn't matter whether you were black, white, male, female, slim, of whatever stature, you could fit in there. And, you know, everyone was, you know, accepted. How do you feel now that all of this has come to the fore where some students are not being accepted, so to speak, because they are wearing locks?
So there's a book called Yurugu by Okuninimba, that's Dr. Maremba Ani. And what it is an African-centered critique of European thought and behavior. And one thing it goes into is this idea of the rhetorical ethic. Now, what the rhetorical ethic is saying one thing and doing another, also known as hypocrisy as a way of life. And this is really the core of what she refers to as the European worldview, where you can have someone who can write, let's say, a Declaration of Independence that says all men are created equal, and meanwhile be enslaving 500 to 600 people in his backyard while raping one of them called Sally Hemings. It's like, you know, what's really going on? Or you can have the French who will talk about liberté, égalité, fraternité, and that's liberty, equality, and then brotherhood, basically, fraternity, right? And those exact same folks in the French Revolution go to re-establish enslavement in Haiti, right, and then other islands there. And we seem to have a very hard time conceiving of someone being able to do this. It's like, how can you say such lofty and flowery things on the one hand, but then where it comes down to your actual behavior? But this is what it is. The ethics don't extend past the rhetoric. It's they'll say the flowery. So they'll come to you and say, I have a religion for you. And part of the religion in the book, it says, thou shalt not kill. But then they'll come here and cut your heads off and then put them on poles and their colonial enterprise. They'll come here and you see what I'm saying? And that's
as much as I get you on that, in our own African setting, in the empires that we've had and all of that, the battles that have been fought, our own kings and emperors and rulers have done the same, haven't they?
So I'm going to come to this point as well, because the people who we consider to be kings, a lot of them are colonial creations, right? You have people who didn't even have kings or something of that sort, but literally the British, you know, specifically because they said we want to do indirect rule, they would actually take people and now, all right, guess what, you're a king, you're going to do this. Even at, you know, Ekwapen, you had one family who was ruling, but another family, because they knew how to read and write a little bit better, now they became the rulers. You have a similar case like that at Adriso, right, where the one who sold out the Asantes became the ruler. So when we talk about our own, we have to ask the question, how, to what degree are they our own, and to what degree were they actually installed in order to pull off the indirect rule that the British decided they wanted to do? So that's one point. But then also it comes back to this exact same idea of the rhetorical ethics. So to come back to the Achimota, you know, case, if they're talking about everyone being one and all these lofty ideas of equality and so forth and so on, it's probably the most elitist thing that you can ever imagine. Right? Do you see like the plantain chip seller, you know, going to, like, this is where the leaders of Ghana have come from by and large, the most, you know, elite people. But then the
it's
rhetoric.
Interesting you mentioned that, because Robert Mugabe schooled in, back then it was called, you know, before it became even Achimota Secondary School or Senior High School, now that we call it that, it was the Achimota College, and then even before that it was the Prince of Wales College. But it's produced the likes of Robert Mugabe, may his soul rest in peace, Kwame Nkrumah, may his soul rest in peace, Edward Akufo-Addo, you have Evans Atta Mills, Jerry John Rawlings, a long list of, you know, people. A lot of our presidents actually schooled there. So just to reinforce what you said about the creme de la creme, the cream of society actually, you know, coming from there. But is that necessarily wrong? Is there anything wrong with that?
So it's just it's not to say it's wrong. It's to the point that what it says is different from what it actually does. So if you see a school that, you know, is saying all of this flowery language, what they've learned and what most people learn and take away from institutions like that is to say one thing but then do something else. You see what I'm saying?
The school is saying we have discipline, we have rules, regulations, things that must be followed, and we don't allow certain haircuts. Wearing your hair in a certain way is not acceptable. It has been questioned in certain ways, but
should that be a problem? If someone says, it's my religion, I am Rastafarian, and so I wear locks, should the school necessarily say, oh, just because it's your religion, we should accept it, it's your culture, we should accept it?
So part of it is, again, to a double standard. So, you know, the same people who went to this school and are taught to worship an imaginary white man, if that exact same imaginary white man came there and said, I want to go to school, would they ask this imaginary white man that they pray to every Sunday, you have to cut off this bushy hair that you have? You see what I'm saying? This is the double standard, because it's one thing where it comes to the white people who we pray to, but a different thing. And matter of fact, even when I was in Nigeria, I'm walking down the street and children are saying, hey, Jesus, Jesus. And I try to deal with it as though it's not an insult, right? Because they don't know any better. But this is, again, the double standard. If the same white people who come there with the bushy hair, the same people who they pray to with their images of a Jesus or a Moses or whatever came to that school and said, I want an education, would they be turned away at the door? Or is it something that's just specific to black people, that we're not to have our hair the way that it's been as a sign of someone who has a connection to the Creator, as it's been for thousands and thousands and thousands of years? But the problem is those who run that school and those who have come through that school, they don't know any better. The things that I'm telling you right now, right, that all of it can be backed up with documented evidence, iconography, it's carved in stone, so forth and so on. The ones who produced those people, none of them knew that. So now how can those who come through that institution? So this comes also to my own point of view on it, because that institution, and this is an example of it, is a factory for miseducation. There's a book called Miseducation of the Negro, and in it Nana Carter G. Woodson talks about those who are basically aggressively submissive to the point that they insist on going in the back door. And if there is no back door, they'll cut one out for their own special benefit because their miseducation makes it necessary. So these are the types of people who a place like that turns out. Now, so in my personal view, if I have children, it would be child abuse to send them to a place that's going to basically, you know, make their minds into what would amount to little more than mush, you know, at the end of the day. That's going to teach them to be anti-African. That's going to give them miseducation, diseducation, and anti-education. They won't learn about their history. They won't learn about the truth of their past. All they will learn is white people are great, and now the best thing that you can do is learn to be
I'm sure, to be fair, those in Achimota School will feel very aggrieved by what you're saying, because they would say that, no, we're not propagating white manism here. But is that to say that you'll never be sending your children to schools like Achimota? Are your children, do your children wear locks?
Yes, they do.
They wear locks?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's no way they're ending up in such schools?
If they went to that school, it would be child abuse to send a child to a place where you know that they're going to be subjected to miseducation, diseducation, and anti-education. When you actually look, and you know, some years back, people were sending me images of some of the books that are used in these school systems that go into the benefits of colonization. They have images where it says, who is this? And it's an image of an imaginary white man. And the correct answer is that this is supposed to be Jesus. You understand? What is this now going to do to their mentality? What is it going to do to their self-esteem? What is it going to do to even their potential for the future of who they're going to be and who they want to be? You understand? It does a disservice for us to even want to send our children to there.
Right, so let's talk a bit about legislation. And I'm just thinking, do you feel, Dr. Kambon, that maybe we need legislation to set things right in terms of this situation that some people may call discriminatory? In the United States, interestingly, they have the Crown Act, which is the Create a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair Act. It's extant in some 7 states, including California, New York, and basically it points to the fact that you can't discriminate against someone on the grounds of the texture of their hair. And if you do, there are stiff penalties to follow. We've had the situation in South Africa where some 5 police and prison officers were discriminated against because they were wearing locks. They were restored to, you know, the service and given compensation. We saw it in Malawi with a student. We saw it in Kenya, basically a landmark situation with regard to Rastafarianism being accepted as a religion, so to speak. We've seen it in Kenya. We've seen it in, you know, Zimbabwe as well, other countries. Do you feel Ghana is still somewhat behind on that ladder and that we need to learn from such countries and maybe legislate in such a way? Because in Malawi, for example, I recall the Attorney General, the Supreme Court directed the Attorney General, the education ministry, and the school in question to accept this student or be in contempt of the court. Do we need something similar in Ghana?
So, you know, what it really boils down to is who exactly is going to pass the laws, right? Because again, most of those who are in the positions where they can pass the laws are the exact same ones who've been trained to hate who they are as black people and to love anything white. And you see this throughout society, right? You can go to a village and a bus of white people comes up, all the children, and you have these expressions that if you're walking to church and you see a white man, you can go home because, so all of these things that we see, this is the intentional end result of a process to create anti-Africans, to create those who absolutely hate themselves, and not just hate themselves just for the sake of it, but hate themselves because once they do, they have to literally enrich those who taught them to hate themselves. You understand? In terms of what we mentioned before, in terms of the clothes. Once you hate your own clothes, who do you have to go to buy some? Once you hate your own language, who do you have to go to buy books? So all of these types of things. So I think that that's the first challenge, is that the very ones who are in the position to make that type of legislation are some, you know, some of the most anti-African people who you could ever manufacture, and that's the result of an intentional process by the British to set up a system for that. You still have Cambridge curriculum. It's like, what are you going to get other than exactly what your colonial enemies have set up for you in the very first place? That's one point. To the second point, laws as they are written don't protect anyone. It really comes down to enforcement. So you can have a law that says everybody is equal, but if those who are doing the enforcement are deciding that we're going to shoot and put a knee into the necks of black people, well, guess what? Your laws don't mean anything. So the fact that something is written on a piece of paper, that piece of paper isn't going to stop a bullet when it's coming at you. It really comes down to the implementation. And again, who is there to make that type of implementation that's going to be something in the interest of African people, when we are taught literally to be outside of the interests of African people?
Let's even set religion aside.
Yeah.
The way you look, how you carry yourself. You have something Ethiopian. I see so many different things, representative of Africa.
The entirety.
The entirety of Africa. You have a Cyrus on your bracelet. You wear your locks.
This is Dikenga, this is from Congo.
Any people looking at you as though, hey, where are you from? Do you get that even in this ivory tower? Do you get that here?
I would have called it an ebony tower, but ivory tower may be actually more consistent. I'll tell you a situation. So at the linguistics department, there was a young man, I won't mention his name, but he says, I wish I could do what you do, in the sense of like wear my dress as I do and carry myself. Because like when I went for my PhD viva, again, I had my locks, I had my cloth on, I had all of my beads, and then I won the Vice Chancellor's Award for the best PhD thesis in that year. When I went for my job interview, the exact same thing. I had my abosom beads on, I had, you know, my locks, everything, and I'm wearing my cloth. And the director at that time said, oh, are you coming to scare us? I said, why? You know, would you be scared? Actually, these two masks, I was just looking at these two masks on the wall. Someone who was here at African Studies was like, oh, it looks scary. Now here's someone who will pray to an imaginary white man and that doesn't scare her. But then to see someone that looks exactly like her, the face of that mask looked exactly like the woman who's talking, and she's saying that she's scared of this very mask that's on the wall in African Studies of all places. I could see maybe Greek classics or whatever, but here in African Studies, that's again the end result of a calculated process to make her run away from what she should run and run towards what she should run away from.
What would be your final words, Dr. Campbell?
My final words is that, you know, again, what we do for ourselves depends on what we think of ourselves. What we think of ourselves depends on what we know of ourselves. And what we know of ourselves depends on what we have been told about ourselves. So if we see that the end result are people who hate themselves, people who want to perm their hair and bleach their skin, there's a 0% chance that it's just random, that people from one end of the country to the other hate their own clothes and hate their own language and hate everything about who they are from the top of their head down to the soles of their feet. So if we know that that's an intentional and calculated process to create anti-Africans who enrich the enemies of African people, then it means that we have to establish a different system, process, and structure in order to create those who are actually going to be Africans, those who are going to fight for who it is in terms of identity, all the way down to our hair and what it actually means. It has to create those who actually understand our history going back thousands of years and are actually exposed to it. Again, if you don't know very much about yourself, then you won't think very much for yourself, nor will you do very much for yourself. So all of these problems that we say corruption is the end result of a process to create anti-Africans who are going to be corrupt, and that's an intentional process. If you say the problem is tribalism is the end result of an intentional process to create anti-Africans who fight against each other and then leave their colonial enemies sitting right where they are, talking about the benefits of colonialism. This very room where we are right now in African Studies, we ended up having a debate on one of our teachers here. He wanted to set a test question about the benefits of colonialism here in African Studies at the University of Ghana. So that should tell you a whole lot about the miseducation system that has created anti-Africans who are not talking about the results of colonialism or the end, point, whatever. That's more broad. This person is specifically saying, let's deal with the benefits. It means you're even pointing the children, pointing the youth, pointing these students in the direction of worshiping this exact same people who committed murder, rape, genocide, and everything that we can imagine. This very room that we sit in, so we have a lot of work to do.
Nti okunini obadele kambon yeda sese woni atwehwe nkomo yeda sese wanyamre amayen to wait. I'm basically thanking you, Senior Research Fellow here at the Institute of African Studies, for your time with us. Thank you so much. And there's a lot more that we'd love to dig into your treasure chest, your mind basically, on with regard to who we are and what we stand for. Thank you very much for your time. This has been our interaction with Dr. Obadele Kambon, Senior Research Fellow here at the Institute of African Studies. And to all of you who joined us for this conversation, who have been watching all through, hopefully we've all learned a thing or two. Thank you for watching. Welcome back, and from there we hit the newsstands straight away. What are the people talking about? Is it about the fish? Is it about the power situation? Well, we find out as Mama Viowusu actually hits the newsstands to pick the thinking of people. That is up next, right here on the AM show.
Newsweek this week, really, and you can begin to line the issues. We started off with power cuts, the fishes washed ashore. Some people have even consumed those stressed fishes already. There could be implications, we do not know, but we've been given assurances that the situation is under control. We can also talk about GES and the fact that they did not communicate to parents who sent their children to, in some instances, very far away places, only to be told that the schedule for their school program had changed. And I'm talking about the final year students. And then to the very tragic incident that happened in Kaswa with a 10-year-old who was allegedly killed by two teenagers. It's been rather very busy. I am out of the studio somewhere in Kokomlemle near the ATTC. This is a very popular cocoa joint, a place that I come to sometimes, and there's a newspaper stand as well. I want to interact with some of the people to find out what is on their heart, what they've been chasing this week by way of the big stories. So here I am with a gentleman who is very passionate. Please come this way. He's very passionate about the incident in Kaswa. Yeah, you can come up here. Tell my viewers your name.
Yeah, I'm Naftali.
Okay. So I see that you say you're very passionate about the issue of the blood money boys who have been remanded. That's how some people decided to headline this. And then if you look at today, this is the Ghanaian Times newspaper, and the paper reports that the family is hoping that they can bury the boy according to Islamic religion. So what's your thoughts really about this incident?
Okay, basically, in my own opinion, which I stand to be corrected, I think the biggest problem we have in this country is the media. I blame you sometimes.
What have we done?
Yeah, because sometimes the things you show on TV, because now any station you tune to, just bring this, let me give you this money. You know, we don't pluck money on the tree. You have to work for it. So you just can't show people, like the government should regulate those people, the media. Things you have to show. The content is very important because kids are home and they might pick those things. And you know, out there, there's so much peer pressure. So he might meet his friend and he tells the friend, hey, this is what's going on. So let's, boom, then you see they all go, and they end up just like what happened. And when you look at things, I always say the problems we create today cannot be solved by the minds that created them. And parental guidance is also very important. We need to monitor our kids. You can't just give birth and expect the boy to feed himself. Because as soon as you don't give him money to buy food and other stuff, you go out there to look for money for himself. You understand? Because you can see we have a lot of kids who don't sleep at home. It's not that they don't have parents. They have parents, but their parents have forgotten what they need to do to take care of the kids. So I think it's the government should do something about the media, which is very important. That's my opinion.
All right. Thank you very much for sharing your opinion with us. And he's just come to buy his morning cocoa, and I decided to grab him. Thank you so much. Have a good day today. The owner of this newspaper stand is also here. Boss, what's your name?
I'm Charles. Yes.
So this week, I have tried to put down the big stories, but from your standpoints, what has been the big stories this week? Any stories na Osha are running through the newspaper somehow this week?
Oh, okay. Sorry, I sorry be about this week. It's very difficult and I some just say mu ya dimpa we wiase I say sorry we. If say say nyankwara na kwakwaye edubane no. Ya dia ha dimpa wa wiase amafo bebre yura ho I was asam ho. Oh. Anti no so metimi hu say ne omoye no obi e na small so mo ma say ado. Anti de pa corona ya dia yes sure say ya banya no na ya na adele.
Okay. Okay. And apart from Kaswa in Sepsemi, name beyond because this week is not encofo from Good Friday, Easter Monday, Eba week in Wankasano. Fish is na a ponano in Semsem, no so nankofo interested in
that being for interested because ultimately no why who say fish about that one now work was say who could. Oh, and I don't know a problem. I know so I have because you say the idea what fish no said the one and that's a whole difficult number go here and I'm for us a move quickly. Whoa, and no, I've been body that. And you have just nearby ya, beer, the idea of fish no more. I was so much yaki, and I am so mugu edge like a sad nemano. Sunny Abaya, ever so full last program.
Okay, now business in the costing.
Business first, left business, who copa and answer Sunny, social media, na dear buy and a business like for. And I had so buy no. Now you will companies with Brilliant Plan. Mr. Number companies grab at 50. You had a bar a different a goo, and to see our companies remain your video. No, until way I idea you may be a Nuantana, Mayan, sir.
We there cause kakra we so ye be film. Yeah, that's it. This you know I can't go without interacting with these women that I visit sometimes to get cocoa in the morning. Inti Momo newspaper name. In semne kosono ehiamu ana mushebi ana mutiebi
enyaye pa akwada asem particular akwada asem ni da ye ya enu ama so ti say mi ba aye mi ya pa mi ma show TV so wo phone mo so mi share ye se na mo twetwa akwada nu enye fine kra nti se na mo ya advert wo TV so skas ke mi ba che yan ka tro mo so mo njai eni na ma ani breba awa akwada nu mo so.
You me da say and dey be kokon mo mama me for free o me cover bia wo hwa na meba enti ensem na ekoso do so fa ho
no shawa e fa me pa se na kola ne wan anya ade kra enti kai be ya government on ban this advert mo ya wo TV so no schedule no emboa e na man kola ne mo ya ni bre enti na mo ya sa no me da say
me da say so this is, you know, a very popular joint in Kokomlimli near the ATTC, where I have come to visit today, just to interact with ordinary Ghanaians and figure out if they're also interested in the stories that we tell by way of the big stories. There's one more lady who seemed to be very loud here, who I haven't heard from. In Timbese Mibisa, would the paper no, what's your name pay? In Taya, Danny, what you share headlines, Nibiana?
Pachine.
Into this week, a day in seminar, when near home.
About Aqualano, Senomo Kuno, but a very wicked yes, because Ufilima Aqualani, because at the age of 10 years, no more Kuno, they are heartless. The government's in Shannon, ye be my because Siciano. And ye is Obia Pisca, Obia pay quick money. It's the only Shannon my Juma, ever must buy yes, Jumano. It's the Waka government. That's
Miss Medasi by Jumana Kose.
Yeah, Danyamiasimum because COVID nearby and our market now slow. And say I am moving from 50 pesos to 1 cedi. A big complaining by a soon complain.
There be maintenance a course in matter so.
1 cedi.
Back 1 cedi.
1 cedi.
Are they?
Say beans boyeding, oil boyeding, millet boyeding. Into the say over 50 pesos I over boka. And see say I know. Obi a onim say Ghana ayehye no. Uka 1 cedi on kasa. Aha, nti
me a me nim say Ghana ayehye. Say me dey make kasa. O dey mama 50 ana.
Me dey mama 1 cedi na.
All right, me that's very say when me kasa. So really opinions from ordinary persons about our big stories. That's what sent me out this morning. You're still watching the AM show. Continue to stay with us.
Interesting bits there. Ordinary people sharing their thoughts on matters. But the Kosi one see, you know, that's where my concern is. Do stay with us. When we come back, we talk autism right here on the AM show. Welcome back aboard the AM show. Now, on the 2nd of April every year, the entirety of the world marks Autism Awareness Day. However, Autism Awareness Month is used to focus attention on this condition. What it is, the different spectra in which it manifests, and how parents and people living with autism are managing the condition. We're about to have a conversation to demystify autism and make people understand better what it is all about. And joining us for this discussion, we have Dr. Josephine Bertha Kunedu. She is with the University Hospital Legon as a medical officer. Her interest is in early childhood development and psychiatry. We also have joining the conversation Dr. Aaron Ziegler. He's a speech and language therapist and co-director at the Speech Language Wellness Group for Voice, Speech and Swallowing. He is in the United States. Lady, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining the conversation. I think we may have to unmute.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Right. Dr. Ziegler, can you hear me? Right. So let's start from here. Dr. Kunedu, what is autism and what are these spectra? We talk about different spectra on which people could fall who are affected by the condition. What is autism? All right, so maybe
autism is a spectrum, like you are saying. Sorry, I think my connection is not too good. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, hear you, Dr. Kunedu. I can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. Okay, then. Yeah, so thanks for having me. Good morning to your listeners and viewers.
Right.
Autism is a combination of impairments, so a combination of deficits that seems to show up early in life. So about 2 years to 3 years, it starts to manifest. You have children show having social and communication issues. And then they also show repetitive behaviors. And they restrict themselves from interactions.
Right.
And then also they sometimes have sensory deficits as well. Sensory deficits as in not tolerating certain textures and feels. So they are averse to certain feelings. So some will not prefer to stand on a stone or grass or certain areas wet, and then they just get irritated by some of these things.
Right.
So that's what the spectrum is, and there's no clear-cut definition as to what one person will manifest, so that they come with a combination, and that's what makes it a spectrum. Some may be on the low side of the spectrum, and some may be on the high side of the spectrum.
So talking a bit about the lows and the highs when it comes to the spectrum, because I'm sure this is new to a lot of people who are watching us. What are the things to look out for, the lows and the highs on the spectrum? What are some of the things, for example, a parent should be looking out for when thinking, oh, does my child have autism?
Yeah, so what's some of the things to look out for is when you have a child nearing one who will not start pointing to indicate what they are interested in. So if they want a cup of water and they can see the water, it's expected that they'll start pointing. About 9 months to 1, they should start pointing. And then children also like to look into the faces of people they are interacting with. So if you have a child who avoids looking into the face of other people, then you should be concerned. They all start making about 1 year as well.
So these are some of the...
If you have a child who's not... So if the child had a... Pardon?
No, please go on. Go on. There was just a break with the connection, so you can just repeat your last sentence for us. There was a break in the connection.
Okay.
So please repeat for us if you can.
So if a child does not look in the face, interact. Okay.
So let's while Dr. Konedu works on her her Zoom connection, let's actually get to Dr. Ziegler as well.
They're not, sorry.
Yes. So if the connection is not too good, we may actually try reaching you via phone, Dr. Konedu, and see whether that works better. But let's connect with Dr. Ziegler. Dr. Ziegler, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Great. So as far as you are concerned, of course, autism, quite a condition and quite problematic as well. But a lot of people confuse autism with Down syndrome. What is the real difference?
Well, Down syndrome is going to be a genetic condition that results from an extra copy of their 21st chromosome, and it's going to lead to physical differences as well as intellectual differences. One thing that's characteristic of Down syndrome is hypotonia, so low tone, whereas in the autism spectrum disorder, the issues and challenges are more in the social, communication, and behavioral domains.
So that basically are the differences to look out for. But you, being a speech and language therapist, I would like you to enhance our understanding. I know that there are some who are verbal when it comes to autism and some who are non-verbal. What are the dynamics when it comes to this as far as autism is concerned?
I think it's important to understand that with autism, people who are diagnosed with autism, it's almost like they're wearing different lenses. They see the world in a different way. And their challenges are amplified in a world where we rely on communication, where that's at the heart of our daily lives. And when we see children who don't point at objects that are making noises, or they don't share the attention on a certain scene or something happening, we're concerned that there's social deficits in the social language, the way that they communicate, the pragmatics, the eye gaze. These aspects are challenging, and it can appear that children, and then when they grow up into adults, that they're not interested in communicating. But what's interesting is that the children and adults with autism can have great detailed interests, actually, in a very narrow topic. And so, while it may appear that they don't have an interest, they can actually have quite deep interests. So we see a spectrum from nonverbal to verbal, and from the speech therapist perspective, we're going to help support the child and the adult in communicating in the way that is best for them and meets their functional needs. Obviously, if we can intervene early, then we can help develop communication as best as possible, such as giving somebody the capacity to have some verbal communication that's supplemented with nonverbal communication with, for instance, a communication board or a communication device. We call this augmentative and alternative communication. And we all use alternative and augmentative communication in our lives. Cell phones and texting, or using gestures and pointing, or looking at a menu and pointing to an item in a menu. That's essentially augmenting our communication that's spoken. And so we do that with children who are on the autism spectrum as well. But we can also facilitate their verbal communication in working to improve their speech and language, and also in helping to inhibit certain repetitive behaviors, something we call echolalia, sort of a verbal tic, if you will. Right. So we see this spectrum, and then we have to support them accordingly, because there are differences, it's highly variable in the presentation, and thus our support for anybody with autism would be quite different depending on how they present.
Okay. Let's reconnect with Dr. Konadu now, who joins us via phone. Doc, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Better.
Sorry about the...
No problem. Thank you for reconnecting. So, yes, Dr. Ziegler was just walking us through some of the issues that present themselves with this condition called autism. But yes, how important, one of the things he made mention of is early intervention. Now, how important is early intervention, especially as we're talking about noting some signs early, so that we can actually start reaching out or getting them the necessary help when it comes to communication, when it comes to speaking, when it comes to hearing and all of that? Yes, how important is early intervention?
Yes, please. Early intervention is so critical to the outcome of the spectrum and how the child will learn to be independent eventually. So as early as these signs are noted, the attention should be drawn. A health professional should be contacted so that these children are directed to the places where they will be held. I have had several children come into the consulting room, and I noticed things about the children, ask the parents, and they seem to say, as our local people, let's wait it out. And that children are like that, they will come out of it. But then I mentioned to them, sometimes it's not even an autistic sign per se, but just speech delays and so on. So these things are so critical as early as possible, because a child's brain is such that as the brain is nearing 5, they are less likely to absorb information and be transformed. They are formed certain patterns and habits by the time they are 5. And so if we want to reach these children and get them to full, as near full capacity as possible, we need to start as early as possible. So by 1, for instance, like I said, if a child is not pointing and it's not looking into your face and it's not trying to copy your speech, you should be concerned. And children have some of these behaviors, even for normal kids, sometimes when you mention their names. So, I mean, they'll usually turn more often than not. But if you have a child who does not turn often, then you should be worried, yes. So these are some of the things we should look out for, and as early as possible. And if you go to the hospital and the doctor or whoever sees you gives you a reassurance and you're still noticing these signs, don't sit at home, because we have some of our colleagues who are not on high alert about these things. Sometimes the information is not so much out there. The autism prevalence is about 1% worldwide. So, yeah, you need to be on high alert as a parent, a caregiver, to notice some of these things.
Now, Dr. Kotoko, what you're saying will get some parents, a bit concerned, a bit anxious, because a parent or two may have seen some of these signs. Are these necessarily pointers to autism when you see them? And where do you get assistance? Because I'm saying it from the backdrop that some people sometimes think it's not a problem. Others may say, let's consider traditional remedies and all of that. So how does a parent who suspects his or her child is suffering from this condition, how do they approach it?
Yeah, so once you notice a sign and you are worried, the important thing is to seek help. It's better to be safe than to be sorry. If you come and we reassure you that give it time, this is something that you need, maybe we can give you some pointers to intervene. But if we also give you a direction that please do a hearing assessment, see a speech therapist or see this occupational therapist or whoever, I think the parents should be quick about following through with these things. And like I said, if a parent presents to the hospital with a child and the reassurance is given, but the parent is still unsatisfied, I think the parents should follow their instincts and also seek a second opinion. And one of the things I wanted to chip in with this discussion is the screen-induced autism, which is children who are glued to screens, who may not have developed an autism spectrum, but tend to start exhibiting autism spectrum because of the lack of interaction with the environment and with people, just being glued to the screen. And sometimes parents think that is being helpful to the child, but these ones still also get reversed as soon as it is noticed and as soon as the harmful habits are taken out of the way. Yes.
So just to clarify, Doc, when you say glued to the screen, you're talking of the television, maybe do we have phones and tablets as well?
Tablets, yes. So these are some of the problems.
So too much of that is also bad for the children?
Terrible. Too much of everything is bad. In fact, WHO says that children do not need more than an hour. Children under 5 years do not need more than an hour of screen time in a day. So you can imagine the problem we are having now with this pandemic and online studies for children as little as 5. So some of these challenges must be considered. And especially in this period, parents may begin to see children who may have been talking before, may have been interacting properly, may have been going about and exploring the environment, who may start just sitting in one place and spinning something or just doing something over and over and refusing to ask in terms of speaking to make demands and so on. Parents must be concerned when these behaviors start reversing.
Okay, let me cross over to Dr. Ziegler now, who joins us from that wellness center all the way in the United States. So looking at all these dynamics, we know that autism, I mean, some of them are verbal, some are non-verbal. There's the hearing element, the smelling element, the speech element as well to look out for. But I heard you speak earlier about adults, with autism. And I have heard that some people don't even realize they have autism and they grow up and all of that. Tell us about adults with autism and how maybe it is possible, though not identified as a child, an adult can look at him or herself and looking at his or her signs think, maybe I ought to check myself into a health facility to find out whether I am autistic.
Well, that's a great question. I think that it really we can see that depending on one's context and their environment, it may not be amplified as much. For instance, if somebody is a computer engineer and sitting behind a computer and not interacting with a lot of people, then autism doesn't really have as much of an issue because it's a communication, social, and behavioral condition. So it's really, in those people who are going to, want to engage in a profession where there is more social interaction, dating and relationships, where they want to interact with others. These are areas where you might get clues as to having an issue. If you're not wanting to interact and date, if you're not wanting to interact with coworkers and colleagues, and you have a difficulty adjusting to routine changes, this can also be something that could alert you that perhaps there's an underlying condition that is related to all of these various symptoms, the inability or desire, the lack of desire of communicating and interacting, as well as not having the attention to sustain in various areas, especially when there are many changes. So a highly dynamic environment will be challenging for somebody who has autism. And these can alert the person, but the issue is with autism is it's hard to have perspective and to see oneself and see others and have that ability to empathize. And so being able to be aware of one's behaviors is part of the problem with some autistic people. And so it may be that there needs to be conversations around the various symptoms or behaviors that are contributing to the dysfunction in communication.
Right. Let me ask you this, Doc. You find yourself in the United States. For people, adults who suddenly find out that they have autism, what is the treatment plan? How is it addressed where you find yourself? What are the processes involved?
Well, as an adult, I think it's really person-driven, whether or not it's impacting their life. I think it would be, I avoid telling somebody that they need to change if it's not, if it hasn't been a problem for them. But if they're coming to me with specific concerns, then we would work on those. And specifically, it's really working on those in related to, work, as I mentioned, or relationships, and how can you communicate better in those contexts to thrive and be satisfied in your life. And so we would focus on that social language, that social communication, nonverbal communication, as well as verbal communication like sarcasm and humor, and being able to understand that, because somebody with autism might take a joke very literally. And so that can pose difficulty in the work environment. And so you want to be able to address some of these issues that are going to interfere with the ability to work and contribute to society.
I'll just ask you this question, and I'll pose it to Dr. Konadu as well. In different parts of the world, and here Ghana included as well, sometimes these conditions come with some stigmatization. Is it same where you find yourself? And what would you say people who are being stigmatized, people who are autistic who are stigmatized, ought to do?
I think that certainly some people do receive, there's a stigma attached to having autism. And I think that what we can do and what people with autism can do is really celebrate what is wonderful about them, just like we celebrate what's wonderful about any other person. And there are wonderful aspects of every person, including people who have autism. As I mentioned, some can be savants and quite gifted in music and art. And even if they're not, they're still a person with interests and desires and needs, and we need to honor them. And so sharing space with people who have autism and allowing them to have space and allowing them to share their gifts and their passions, I think, is the best thing that we can do.
Dr. Knedu, let's come to you now. 2 quick questions. The first would be, yes, we usually talk about autism in respect of children. Have you encountered any who grew up before realizing, who grew up into adulthood before realizing they were autistic? What was the experience like? And if you have, the other bit would be stigmatization. How much of it do you see against people who have autism in our society?
All right. So, unfortunately, I haven't encountered an adult who comes forward with the concern that they feel they are autistic. Right. Maybe they might come with maybe behavioral problems or complaints. Maybe they might go to the clinical psychologist with concerns about making friends and social interactions and so on. But just like the other doctor mentioned, the person must have the concern because they've grown with these behaviors. They might own them and think that this is how I am. And especially in our environment, we are so socially groomed that sometimes these behaviors may not even be recognized. The person may be forced into growing out of some of them. So hardly have I come across anyone who has presented themselves in such a way. But of course, the stigmatization is there. It's even there within the families that these people find themselves. So they are isolated. They are not brought in public because they don't want them to put up a behavior that raises concerns. And this becomes challenging for some of these people. I read an article where a lot of these autistic people, their concern is the stigmatization because they feel that people treat them differently and people isolate them. And they also have feelings, even though the bottom line of their problem is social interaction. They also get hurt by some of these things, and we should try and educate people more about these things. Like as has been mentioned already, they have their peculiar gifts. They have ways in which they can blend into society. Some go on to become great artists and so on. Some even become they are good with certain things. So once you find that this person seems to be interested, and you should develop the person in that area and not try to bend them to fit our society. Unfortunately, our educational system and just the society in general is not very welcoming to different people. So a few of these things make it difficult for them to blend in. But once their families are educated, these will help a lot.
So as we gear up to draw the curtains on the conversation, I just want you to quickly address this. Is autism a condition that is curable if you detect it early enough? Is it curable?
So no, it's not curable in general, but it's treatable in terms of the challenges and deficits can be helped. So if it's a verbal problem, it's joint muscle usage, if it is repetitive behaviors, these can all be helped. So the earlier, the better in terms of interaction. I've had a speech therapist who mentioned that it's difficult to work with some of these people when they come in after 5 years because the pattern seems to have been so ingrained for them. So the early detection is really important.
So my final bit to both of you would be your wrap-up comments, and hopefully we have all got a lot more education and understanding of autism. I'll start with you, Dr. Ziegler. What would be, in 30 seconds or less, your wrap-up comments?
I'd say be aware of these concerning symptoms in your children and follow up with the pediatrician, but also realize that that even if someone is diagnosed with autism, they are a special person who are have their own talents, and we want to honor them.
Dr. Ziegler?
Yes.
Please go on.
Yeah. And so I would follow up with the pediatrician. I would or a child psychologist, and I would make sure there's an evaluation, get a second opinion if you're concerned with the first evaluation, but monitor and intervene early, and then cultivate the child's interests and talents. Any child, even with autism, will have interests, and so we want to honor those interests and support them to interact with the world. They have a lot to share, and it's just a matter of being able to express that, and we can support that in speech therapy.
Okay. Let's come to Dr. Konedu, your wrap-up comments very quickly.
Yes, please. So I'd like to say that, yes, autism is a thing. We have to be aware of it, clinicians, the general public, and all. And being a community that lives together as Ghanaians, I think that if this is approached in a more community-based way, it will be very helpful. Unfortunately, our society seems to be drifting away from this community kind of living, but everybody needs to be on board with autism because it is a big burden on the families of these people, because the care has to be very, very critical. The care has to be specially done, and these people need a lot of help socially, support as well. And as soon as it is noticed, do not feel that you are encroaching on someone, especially schools and family members. Please mention it. Parents should get an opinion, seek help, visit a clinic, see a doctor, seek help. If you're not satisfied with what is told you, seek second opinion, and let's help these people blend into society.
Thank you so much, Dr. Josephine Bertha Konedu. She is with the University Hospital Legon as a medical officer, and her interest is in early childhood development and psychiatry. We're also joined by Dr. Aaron Ziegler. He's a speech and language therapist in the United States. He is with the Wellness Group for Voice, Speech and Swallowing. Dr. Ziegler, Dr. Konedu, thank you very much for staying with us, joining us for this conversation. But up next, we have Showbiz with Kadi. Do stay.